The International Finance Corporation, a division of the World Bank, is advising the government of Tajikistan on the development of a large silver mine known as the Konimansur-Kolon project. For that purpose, IFC an initial scoping of the key environmental, social, and health issues. Tajikistan is a central, mountainous Asian republic north of Afghanistan. North of the city of Dushanbe, which is the capital of the republic, lies the town of Kujan, the provincial capital of Sugd province. Kujan is also known for being a city founded by Alexander the Great on the Silk Road. North of Kujan lies the city of Adrasman, close to the Uzbek border. Konimansur-Kolon project is right beside and involves the city of Adrasman. We're seeing now map 2.3, which is a series of satellite imagery that was prepared for a field mission carried in the fall of 2010. The purpose of the field mission was to sample soil, water, assess the situation of health condition, and measure radiation in the vicinity. The city of Adrasman, which hosts 13,000 people presently, has been the site of mining since 1940s. We're seeing now the old uranium concentration plant. Nowadays, uranium is no longer mined, but a small silver underground mine is still ongoing. Both activities have left quite conspicuous mark on the landscape. The proposed project, which will be an open pit mine, has an extent which covers pretty well the whole city of Tajikistan, which will need to be resettled. The setting is mountainous and the climate is semi-arid. The former uranium concentration plant was later reconverted to sulfide concentration, mostly silver. And that silver mining activities for the last 30 years have led to accumulation of rather impressive tailing mounds in the landscape south of the city. The tailing covers close to 1 square kilometer and is believed to be the source or possible source of contamination of both water, soil, and in the vicinity. For that reason, the government of Tajikistan have led previous surveys of snow, vegetation, and soil in the area, showing indeed traces of heavy metal contamination. The present mission have sampled soil and water upstream from the mining activities and directly from the sludge coming out of the concentration plant. In addition, soil has been sampled both from the tailing and from areas further down from the mining activities along the riverbeds. The observation also shown impressive wind mobilization of dust particle from the tailing surface, which is unvegetated and exposed, and shows almost desert-like aeolian features, witnessing that it is a source of dust for the community. About a dozen samples of water and soil were taken during the present mission. The analytical result confirmed that the sludge being accumulated in the tailing pond is rich in heavy metals, mostly zinc and particularly lead, to a concentration of close to 1%. Soil sampled in the area, therefore, not surprisingly, have rather high zinc content and especially systematically very high lead content. The lead content is in fact 2 to 3 times the highest threshold considered acceptable in Europe. While uranium mining in the vicinity of Adrasman went on for only a few years, uranium concentration and processing went on for over 30 years, with ore coming from other republics. This has led to the accumulation of 6 uranium waste pile very close to the community of Adrasman. They were numbered 1 to 6 accordingly. We're seeing 3, 4, and we're moving now towards 5 and 6. In 1994, all these piles were cleaned up and removed and moved entirely to a single location, which is pile number 2, and which we will see in a few moments. Despite the cleanup, bits and pieces of uranium waste have been left over, as observed, for instance, in pile number 6, where we can still see leftovers waste as measured by the radiometer. Material being moved to pile number 2, which is located well inside the projected mine footprint, has been secured by being covered by sterile stone and soil, and is theoretically has isolated the uranium waste. However, torrential rainfalls have led to outwash from that waste pile, and the washout is being directed towards the community. We're seeing the gully head here, which exposes the pink uranium waste in the middle of the covering rubble. Radioactivity measurement here shows that this is about 30 times the background level, which means that people exposed to this receive their annual dose in about 2 weeks. Isotopic analysis shows the progeny of uranium and shows rather remarkably the very high content of radium in the uranium waste, which indicates that this is likely the source of impressive or important radon emission to the community. Should the Connie-Mansur-Colon project go ahead, uranium waste management problem will focus on what to do with pile number 2. It can either be rehabilitated and left in place, in which case the mining design will have to be changed, or it can be moved to another safe location. According to the chief scientist of Vostokredmet, the cost of rehabilitation or moving range from $11 to $70 million.
We're now going to think about and consider potential health impacts of the project. So we're zooming into the town of Adrasman. This is the welcoming shot as you drive into the town itself. And we're looking now at a panoramic view where you see the old mine works that were previously described. We're now zooming over to the current maternity ward, which is actually adjacent to the main hospital. There's a large medical staff that includes 14 physicians, some of whom you're seeing now, and a total staff of about 100. There is a large amount of regional data that is collected and processed, and you're seeing some shots of that. This data is sent to the regional provincial area of CARICOM, where it is recorded in a systematic fashion. We're also now looking at some of the possible impacts of mining, which are typically related at this site to lead and possibly radon, and you've seen that described in earlier sections. From a health point of view, we think about how people are exposed, and the critical pathway is likely to be wind or inhalation. We're seeing a shot now of some of the dust that's coming off the tailing piles, which we know has high concentrations of lead and other metals, but dominated by lead. Important to remember is that visible dust is not the same thing as respirable dust, which is a smaller fraction. We're now zooming and looking at some of the water sources to the site. Water comes in from an external source who is not felt to be impacted by the mine site. However, surface water and sediment impacts have been demonstrated in the environmental assessment. This becomes important because we know and have observed that there is some local gardening and animal husbandry, so we know it completes a pathway from source to potential human ingestion by way of the food pathway. This pathway has not been characterized. We're now looking at some shots of some of the people in Adrasman, and there is a large population of women. Many of the men work in Russia and send remittances back home. Interestingly, there is, and we're seeing some of the medical staff, there's a high fertility rate, much higher than former Soviet republics, that has still been maintained in Adrasman. We're now summarizing some of the key environmental findings because there are data gaps, particularly related to heavy metals, which have never been measured in either workers, either current or former, or any community members. This is particularly important for young children under the age of 7 and also pregnant women, as there are likely to be complete pathways of lead to them. We're now going to think about resettlement, which is a very important issue, and we're zooming in to some panoramic shots of the town. Adrasman has about 2,500 households based on the 2010 census, and you see a variety of complex and significant structures. These are both housing and municipal features. Remember, as previously described, the footprint of the proposed mine will subsume the entire existing town. So therefore, everyone will have to relocate. Adrasman is an old town of 70 years, so there is extensive foliage, all of which has been planted by local inhabitants over several generations. Therefore, we do not feel that resettlement will be simple or inexpensive. And our current estimates are about $50,000 per household, which would generate a cost in the range of $125 million US. In addition, there are a number of significant cultural buildings of architectural significance. And we're seeing a shot now of a tea house that was built, and you can see the extensive hand carving that goes back to 1980. This is actually adjacent to the hospital and is frequently used by the hospital staff. In addition, it's important to remember there are local cemeteries and other municipal infrastructure, all of which will either have to be moved or reconstructed in a new location. Now, one way to determine and come to grips with how much has to be moved is to do what we call object-oriented analysis. This takes the satellite imagery, which you're seeing, and now you're seeing a red infrared band to bring out foliage. Now we then to another analysis where we start to disaggregate some of the findings to see relationships, and you can see how the buildings stand out. We're now looking at a green vegetation index, again to look at the trees, which are very important to locals. And then we're then switching it over to take that data and put it in a geographic basis so we can calculate density and size. And that's what you're seeing in this picture, where we have the object-oriented foliage highlighted with the buildings in the background. Now you're looking at dense green for trees, lighter green for other vegetation, and the gray representing buildings. And we again mathematically turn that into different geometric shapes, which will allow for some estimates of cost as the project moves into later phases. We're now going to step back and look at some other aspects of the project. Based on our site visit, there has been no public consultation that has been done. However, the residents are aware that the project is being considered, but there has not been a formal stakeholder engagement effort that has been made, and local residents do express concern as to what the future holds. Now, one of the important issues that will have to be settled is where would the town be relocated to? There are several different opportunities for that. Now, resettlement, while complex, can offer several positive opportunities for the local inhabitants, and some of these are listed, such as stable income, improved farming and garden, training, and of course the obvious elimination of exposure to heavy metals and hazardous materials.
This visual presentation is a digest of the field mission and sort of an abstract of a full report which is being compiled at the present time. I am Professor Michel Bouchard from McGill University, and together with my colleague Dr. Gary Krieger from Newfield, We wish to acknowledge contributions from the personnel of IFC, notably Principal Investment Officer Isabelle Marquez de Sa and Senior Environmental Specialist Dr. Isabelle Paris.